Hello all, how's it going? We are going to talk about Chapter 7 today, Extending X-Bar Theory to Functional Categories. And I just got this new fancy microphone, so I'm going to use that. So yay, that's exciting. Today we're going to look at two main differences we will make in our tree structures in order to account for the evidence of X-Bar theory. So last chapter we learned that the only non-head element of a phrase must be another phrase. But what about determiners? Don't worry, we'll get back to that. X-bar theory also says that the only obligatory part of a phrase is the head, but that doesn't really account for CPs and TPs. We'll come back to that again later as well. In order to understand the determiner phrase, we're going to start by talking about possessives. Look at the phrase, the girl who loves cheesecake's screencast. You'll notice that the possessor is the girl who loves cheesecake, and the genitive S cannot be located anywhere inside of that phrase, but must be located on the end of it. It shows that we can have a possessive or we can have a determiner, but we can't have both. So what that means is that they are in complementary distribution. It means they're performing a similar function and therefore are part of a same category. So believe it or not, this evidence shows that the determiner is actually part of its own phrase. The DP hypothesis states that the determiner is the head of its own phrase and the noun phrase is actually the daughter of a D-bar. So let's look at the phrase that we just went over, the girl who loves cheesecake screencast. You'll see that DP branches to D-bar, which includes the determiner as genitive and the noun phrase that modifies it. Also notice that a second DP phrase modifies the D-bar and includes the girl who loves cheesecake. Ba 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 ba, the new set of X-bar rules is born. So moving right along, folks, because we got a lot to say and not a lot of time to do it, we're going to talk about clauses. Clauses include a subject and a predicate, and there are main clauses and embedded clauses, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Embedded clauses are inside of main clauses. So we're going to talk about three embedded clauses. Complement clauses, not that kind of compliment, okay, just seriously. So complement clauses are I dropped the camera, sisters to the verb. Adjunct clauses are a kind of embedded clause that modifies a noun. And lastly, specifier clauses are actually an embedded clause that acts as the subject of the main clause. For cake to be that good is a miracle. True that. So just to recap, we've got main clauses, and within those main clauses, three different kinds of embedded clauses. Specifiers, complement, and adjunct clauses. You're a pro on the clause, time. I don't know what that means. Okay. So another way that we can classify clauses is whether they are finite or not finite, tensed or not tensed. Although it might seem simple, there are some times where it's ambiguous. For example, these sentences. Bellfire, I know you steal my hair ties. I've never seen you steal my hair ties. These clauses may look the same, but let's do some tests to see if they're finite or not finite. First thing we're going to do is change the verb in question and see if there's agreement. If there's agreement, it's finite. If no agreement, then not finite. Oh. Looks like the top one's finite. Bam! So another thing you can do is test the case of the subject. If it takes the nominative case, then that means that it's finite. And if it takes the accusative case, that means it's non-finite. So as you'll see, the sentence on the bottom takes the accusative case, meaning it's non-finite. You can also test to see if the subject is required. If the subject is not required, that means that it's non-finite. If it is required, then it's finite. Another way you can tell is by looking at the T elements. Finite clauses take most auxiliaries, while non-finite clauses will only take two. Sad and lonely two. So looking again at the examples of Bellfire stealing my hair ties, which he does all the time. In the first example, we can add a will in there, an auxiliary. The second example, we can add a to, but can we add a will or a have? No, not gonna work. Hey folks, welcome to part 2. Thought I'd change up the music to keep you on the edge of your seats. We're going to start by talking about how to account for the lack of complementizer in the X-bar theory. Many other languages use a complementizer to form yes-no question. All other languages, including English, use subject-auxiliary inversion. That means subject-auxiliary inversion is performing a function of a complementizer. So when the subject and the auxiliary aren't inverted, then there has to be a complementizer there, right? Ba-ba-da-ba! Introducing the null complementizer. So if we imagine taking the question, will I eat cheesecake, and making it into a statement, I will eat cheesecake, we can see that it leaves the null complementizer. Moving on to more evidence. English only allows two things that are alike to be conjoined. Cheesecake and strawberries. Eat and devour. Eaten strawberries? No. So then why is it that in English we allow a statement to be conjoined with a question? You will bring me cheesecake, but will it be soon? So if a phrase with a complementizer or a null complementizer can be conjoined with another phrase, doesn't that mean that that phrase also has a null complementizer? More evidence is the overt complementizer if that can be found when you embed a question in another clause. I asked if Bellfire stole my hair ties. Alright, so moving on to TPs. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, all the TPs that we draw don't always have T's in them. So what's up with that? We're going to look at evidence that shows that modals and tense inflections are also in complementary distribution, which means that they are also part of the same category as well. Looking at some example sentences, she might eat cheesecake with a modal and she eats cheesecake with a tense inflection. We see that we can have the modal, but we also can't have the tense inflection as well. So that means that they are both functioning as tense. Selectional analysis tells us that in order to express the tense within trees that have inflectional tense, we will draw them branching down from a T-bar. And the tense will be expressed in either minus past or plus past, according to the verb. So let's go over what we learned today really quick. We learned that determiners are actually the head of their own phrase. Determiner phrases are actually strong, independent constituents that don't need to be a part of no NP. We learned that there are 3 different kinds of embedded clauses, and you can also organize clauses into finite or non-finite tense, and we also learned some tests on how to do that. We discussed some evidence that says that all clauses have complementizers, and we also learned that every clause now actually has a T element within the tree that we will draw of that clause. So I like plain cheesecake, but preferably made from scratch. Just wanted to let you know, just throwing it out there. Bye!